Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. We're still working on my Q&A video. That one's taken a little longer than I expected, of course, but we are going down here today to Saqqara, and I'm going to talk about a couple different things. One is this, and this is called the Great Enclosure, and this is just a big mystery, and this might be one of the oldest superstructures we have in Egypt. And I had a question on Mastabas and what was down here, so I thought I'd make a video on this. But here you see just a lot of stuff right under the ground, and there was good research done here on these Mastabas, and I've never made a video on these, and people said, well, they really didn't pay much attention to them, and then they started realizing that these were very important. So I just want to give you a look and just do a little reading of what were in these here. And these are pretty complex, a lot more complex than they look right here. And Saqqara is very ancient, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that in an upcoming video. Now here I'm just going to read from this website that says the first dynasty tombs of Saqqara in Egypt, and they just show some things that were found here, and I'll show some pics of what these mastabas look like. But here you can see the jackal dog on this important artifact that was found. And why would a jackal be found? Well, because there was a big one guarding the Giza necropolis. Here you see something else that was found here, but I'm just going to do a little reading. Now it says, Saqqara is one of the best known as well as oldest dynastic necropolis in Egypt. It is popular among tourists, but many of them may never visit or even know about its oldest royal tombs. These are what were once believed to be the first dynasty tombs of largely legendary founders of Egypt, but their burials lack the grandeur of other monuments in the vicinity, and now many scholars believe that these tombs, while dating to the first dynasty, were probably those of high officials rather than kings themselves. And it says, as early as 1912, a large archaic cemetery was known to exist in North Saqqara, though it did not receive any serious attention until 1932. And it was still another 20 years before many of these results were published. The lack of enthusiasm for these excavations was probably due in no small part to the perception that they were poor collector sites. However, after some scholars came to believe that these were the tombs of Egypt's first dynasty pharaohs, they received more attention, afterwards followed by much debate because the same rulers also had tombs at Abydos in Upper Egypt. One theory was that one of these set of tombs, either at Saqqara or Abydos, were cenotaphs, or ceremonial tombs. And it says all these tombs, in both locations, were severely plundered in antiquity. And I just want to show you a few pics of what these mastabas look like. Here is one. Here is a pic of another. I know some of these are a little blurry. Here is a diagram of one of these mastabas and what it looked like originally. These weren't just, it wasn't just a pile of mud with some stones around it. It was pretty complex. And here is one before time really got to it and probably got recovered by sand. But there is a lot right below the sand here in Saqqara that is very fascinating. And if it was uncovered, and if you got to look below, you'd be pretty amazed, I think. Here's a look at another one of these mastabas. Here's another one. Another one. And here's another one. And you notice some of these have a descending passage in a big open pit. Was that what these were built over, or was this the original burial place? That's still a little confusing. But I just thought I would talk about those. I have not talked about the mastabas. I know I have just mentioned them. The ones up at Abu Ruwash that appear to be from the earliest dynasties of Egypt. And I know Charles Koss did a video on mastabas. And I like Charles's channel. He's got very good curiosity. But what I want to talk about next here is this place here. This is known as the Great Enclosure, and this is really a superstructure all covered up. You really can't even make out it's there. But from overhead, you can clearly see it. And this is an amazing 600 meters long. 600 meters by 300 meters wide. That is a massive structure, and they really don't have any good reason for it or explanation for it. People originally, I thought, theorized that maybe this was an enclosure for a pyramid, but there's no sign of a pyramid in the middle of this. And this is just a great mystery, just a lot of theories. And since there is stuff here that is very old, right next to it is the unfinished pyramid, so-called, of Sekhmet, that the golden alabaster sarcophagus was found in, right next to it here. But this is a great mystery. What is this? Well, let's just do a little reading. Now this is ancientegypt.org, and I will leave a link below. It says, to the west of the unfinished pyramid of Sekhmet, a large enclosure structure was discovered composed mainly of a gigantic enclosure wall. With its 600 meters by 300 meters, this enclosure encompasses an area that is even larger than Necher Eket's neighboring complex. It has long been assumed without any substantial examination of this structure that this wall, known as the Great Enclosure, or by its Arab name, Gisr El Mudir, was part of an unfinished mortuary complex of an unidentified third dynasty king. Just a lot of guesses. There is, however, no trace of a step pyramid inside this wall. Furthermore, this wall seems to have been completed, which would make the building of a pyramid within its compounds quite impossible. It finishes up here, if the enclosure at Saqqara is indeed of the second dynasty date and not, as assumed in the past, of the third dynasty, then the Great Enclosure is to be considered one of the oldest known buildings constructed, at least partially in stone. And to be honest, I think the Great Enclosure is pre-dynastic. It's just as old as some of the oldest things in Saqqara. And it looks a lot like a wall at Abydos. And people have theorized that underneath the sand, it kind of looks like this very ancient wall at Abydos that I don't think there is really a good answer for. And as I have shown in some recent videos, there's some really, really old stuff at Abydos. Now, these walls were incredibly thick, and I say walls because there's actually two walls. And there is stuff in between here, and let me just go over to this website, but this had to be incredibly important for the sheer size. We still have no clue. Now this is Reveille, and I'll leave the link below. It says, the structure consists of a rectangular wall oriented north-south, and that is slightly off the direct north-south alignment, and that measures about 650 meters by 350 meters. I have it here. The walls consist of two outer walls made of roughly hewn limestone about 50 meters apart. The space between them is filled with crushed stone, gravel, and sand. In the northwestern corner, the walls survive to a height of about 4.5 to 5 meters, over 15 courses of stone. It says the style of construction suggests an original height of about 10 meters. In the south, the state of preservation is clearly worse than in the north. Since the west wall of the structure is 30 meters shorter than the east, the south wall probably consisted of two parallel walls forming an entranceway. This pattern recurs in large funerary complex at Djoser's step pyramid. The walls were probably completed in an enclosed area. No remains of the construction have been found, so there cannot have been a pyramid or a mastaba at the center. Since these constructions would have been erected before the completion of an enclosure wall, the small building may have existed in the northwest corner of the space, since numerous limestone, pink granite, and basalt fragments were found there. Now, this is a book called Early Dynastic Egypt by Toby Wilkinson, and it talks about the National Museums of Scotland Saqqara Survey Project, and they did some magnetometry survey, and I'm just going to read. The survey of this type and limited test excavations have been conducted at the mysterious Great Enclosure, or Gisr El Mudir, in the desert to the west of the step pyramid complex. They have confirmed that the enclosure is not an unfinished step pyramid complex of the Third Dynasty, like there's a whole grouping, but rather a structure reminiscent of the First Dynasty funerary enclosures at Abydos. Furthermore, the construction of the Great Enclosure suggests that it predates the step pyramid complex and is probably the oldest substantial stone building in Egypt. The identity of its owner is still a mystery, but may be solved by further excavations. So, in other words, they don't have a clue. This is one of the oldest structures in all of Egypt. But that is a look at some of the mastabas in Saqqara, in the Great Enclosure. Huge building, no answers. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.